My message to the losers: losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should. Sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror, okay? That's what I hate about the left. You're brats. You're brats and you're snobs, and people don't like that.
You're brats and you're snobs, and people don't like that. All right, here with reaction, president and executive editor at the Daily Signal, Bluey, along with Democratic strategist Lee Neves, and award-winning documentary filmmaker Melissa Francis joins us here live in the studio. Melissa, I'm going to start with you here. We know I'm going to start with Bill Maher because he famously says, "All right, snap out of it, stop crying, grow up. This isn't your, my father's or his father's Democratic Party." He may have gotten it right, but Democrats overall just seem to be very confused and not sure how to move forward. What are you observing?
I mean, I don't know, the silence after he made, I guess it wasn't a joke, which is kind of the problem when they do this on these shows. That was amazing when he said that in the whole audience. It was just like nothing. But I don't know. I've seen so many of these elections, and afterwards, the party that loses always turns on itself with carnivorous glee and kind of rips itself apart and does say, we're never, with what we just saw in the coalition that was just built by the other side, we're never going to win again. So I do think that this is pretty typical. They do need to take a very hard look and just realize that being a snob and looking down on the American electorate is not a great way to get votes.
That appeared to be the case.
Yeah, it didn't work out,
yes,
did it?
Didn't work out.
No.
And maybe there is some soul searching that needs to be done. Maybe when Bill Maher makes that joke, Lee, there should be a reaction to it instead of like, huh?
Crickets.
Crickets.
Yeah,
what are you talking about? We should look in the mirror. I think they should.
Well, two things. First of all, it is Veterans Day, and I would like to say thank you to all those veterans out there who are far braver than I and made the sacrifice to keep this country safe and free. But on the Bill Maher thing, instead of crickets, I think there should have been a bunch of people running to look in the mirror. I've said it on this network. I've said it many times since Election Day. And I've said it even before the election. Democrats need to get away from the era of identity politics. They need to get back to talking about working class issues. Donald Trump won because his campaign spent all their time telling voters they were right to be worried about the economy, and the Democrats spent all their time telling them they were wrong. And that feeds into that narrative that the Democratic Party is elitist, the Democratic Party is smarter than you, and they're going to tell you what to do, and you should just go along with it because they're just smarter and they went to these all Ivy League colleges. Democrats need to get back to being that working class, middle class party that it was under Clinton and to an extent under Obama.
Rob, do you think that they can do that? The Democrats can do that, say, I don't know, by midterms?
It's going to be very difficult, to be honest with you, and I'll tell you why. The Democratic Party, I think, has isolated themselves into these elitist bubbles in New York and L.A., and I don't know that they've lost touch, frankly, with the working class voter. There are a few people in the party who still remain in touch with them. Obviously, they represent the very few congressional districts that have a majority of Republican support in those districts, but I don't know how they go about doing this when you have a consultant class that has invested so heavily in these woke issues that are completely out of touch with the rest of America. And we saw this coming. I mean, this is no surprise to those of us who actually paid attention what was on the mind of voters months and months ago. And that was the economy, inflation, crime. Democrats just ran away from those issues and pretend they didn't exist.
They pretended they didn't exist, and they continued to badmouth the blue-collar men and women. And I said this leading up into the election, the internal polling from the Teamsters Union, that should have been sending alarm bells off within the Democrat Party, whether it did or not. It didn't look like it. Melissa, same question to you. Do you think it's possible that they can shift from what the Democrat Party truly is now?
I don't know, because what the Democratic Party truly is now is a bunch of people that go to Washington just to get rich. I mean, you talk about President Obama as being someone that was in touch with the working class. Are you kidding me? He's the most elitist of all. Look at all the homes he has. Look at the different foundations that he's set up to make so much money. He is now one of the wealthiest people out there on the circuit. And why is that? I mean, because all of these people go to Washington to get rich, not to help the people they're supposed to represent. And that is what Democrats have woken up to.
Lee, you of course are a Democratic strategist, but we've had kind of some spars with you throughout this campaign, where you were saying that Kamala Harris is very much on track, that she's doing the right thing. Do you think that maybe one of her fatal flaws was that moment on The View where she said that she wouldn't change anything, that everything that Biden had done, she has no regrets?
Hindsight is 20/20, but yes, I think that probably was the fatal flaw, coming onto The View and saying I wouldn't do a thing, because obviously Americans were anxious. They were anxious about the economy. They didn't think the economy was going in the right track. President Biden, Wisconsin on election day, he had a 38% approval rating. Nevada, it was 40%. All the other swing states, it was 41%. His approval rating was always underwater. And there comes a point in time when you're running for office, I get it, wanting to be deferential to the guy who's your boss, technically, but you got to kind of break and say, look, this is where I disagree with them. And it's okay to say, he is the boss. I follow his lead because he's the boss, but here's what I would do differently. And especially when you're running for the highest land in the office, yes. And the other fatal flaw, if I may add, is in the final home stretch, and I was even saying this going into the final home stretch, that she focused too much on who Donald Trump is. Look, Americans knew who Donald Trump was, and they were still supporting him. Yeah. No one's like shocked that, oh my God, Donald Trump says bad things and he sends out bad tweets. Everybody knew, and they were still supporting him. And to double down on that, instead of talking about the economy, talking about here's how we are going to improve, even to say this is how we are improving right now, and this is how we're going to improve, so you don't have to pay $100 for 2 bags of groceries. Should have been doing that instead of saying Donald Trump was bad.
Rob, also the lack of media appearances Kamala Harris did, especially for the beginning bulk half of the campaign. She really didn't ramp that up to the end until she started getting called out. Hey, you're not talking about enough policy. You're not talking about enough policy. Do you think that was a miscalculation on her campaign's part, to think that voters, well, they won't care. They'll just kind of believe whatever, and they got rebuked?
Well, absolutely it was. There's no question that the American people didn't really know what she stood for. And they drew the conclusion that she stood for everything that Joe Biden did for the last 4 years, because she had done nothing to demonstrate that she was going to go in a different direction, which is why I agree with most of what Lee said, but I'll disagree with one thing. I don't think that there was anything you could do to salvage Kamala Harris's campaign at the end of the day, because she was so closely tied to Joe Biden. What the Democrats really should have done was had a condensed primary after Biden decided not to run, and let the voters decide, rather than just anoint her, and that was their fatal flaw.
Melissa, we have just about 10 seconds left, but as the Democrats rebuild their party, who leads it?
I have no idea. No one that we've seen out there, certainly not Kamala. You could see that look of relief that she was off the hot seat there. They have a lot of reorganizing to do. They should try and support the people and focus on helping people instead of just getting rich.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Great conversation. Rob, Lee, and Melissa, thanks to all of you.
Thank you, guys.